Not even the Inquisition could hide the fact that Darktide had a rough launch. Crashes, performance issues, a crafting system that actively hated you, and more bugs than in Nurgle's garden. Those were dark days. But 4 years and many updates later, the question is, has Darktide finally clawed its way back to the Emperor's light, or has it truly fallen to chaos? The first thing Darktide absolutely nails is the sheer Warhammeriness of it. This isn't a game that's ashamed of its source material. It recognizes that Warhammer 40k is profoundly, gloriously stupid, yet also extremely cool. That's how you get awesome stuff like upside-down churches hanging from the ceiling of a multi-layered cake of a city, or absurd nonsense like some dead guy being turned into a radio, and that is considered a good fate in the Imperium. And the more over the top it gets, the better it is. My favorite map, purely on vibes alone, is No Man's Land. You're running through ruined trenches, planes are bombing targets just out of sight, and all the while you're fighting around a beautifully ugly Leman Russ tank in all of its boxy glory. It is grim and depressive, but with just enough bravado to make it feel exciting, and that right there is Warhammer 40k in a nutshell. But for every high-speed train you get to fight on, there's free missions that are just endless poop brown and gunmetal grey corridors. After a while, even Heresy starts sounding like a nice change of pace compared to another trip through the sewers. But does this mean the maps are bad? No, they are all quite fun, and I really do mean all of them, even the sewers. But much like an AdMech priest with all of his limbs still intact, there is definitely room for improvement. But what doesn't need any changes is the combat. When I say that Darktide has the best melee combat of any game I have ever played, I am not saying that because someone is polishing their bolter right next to my head. It is damn near perfect. Just the right balance between being fast and visceral and slow and tactical. Once you wrap your head around it, you can smash through hundreds of enemies like you're the Doomslayer. I especially love how instead of fearing a gun line of enemies, you can run directly at them, matrix dodge through a hail of bullets, and then basically use their insights to repaint the room. It is that moment when someone with a heavy machine gun goes, "Aw crap," and then starts running away that makes the whole thing deeply, deeply satisfying. So after playing Darktide, I can definitely see why the Khorne boys have so much fun. But this sort of power does not come free, as Darktide is the very definition of easy to learn, hard to master. There aren't that many buttons to worry about, it's mostly just attacking, dodging, blocking, and occasionally sliding. But how you combine those four will decide whether you'll have time for a bathroom break because you're dead on the floor, or if you're just gonna blitz through anything the game throws at you. And once you get good at it, the power trip is unbelievable. My only real gripe is that despite a wealth of insane and insanely cool weapons, Darktide hasn't done much to explore the crazier side of Warhammer 40k. But since every weapon is fun to use and surprisingly unique, it is less of a complaint and more of a wish list. Because let's be real, vaporizing a Plague Hound mid-flight with a Melta-gun would be sweet. But since this is a challenging game, how does it actually feel to play with randoms, and can you even go at it alone? Unfortunately, solo play isn't really a thing. You can add it through mods, but since the bots are about as useful as soap in a Nurgle convention, I wouldn't recommend bothering with it. For the best experience, you'll want real people, and thankfully, that mostly works great. The game has a large enough player base that you can find games even at 3 in the morning, and don't ask me how I know. And while the Darktide crowd isn't quite as cheerful as the Deep Rock Galactic stands, I've mostly had positive experiences. It's just a bit quiet since everyone is too preoccupied with not getting chucked off the map to really strike up a casual conversation. But about that, mostly. There is a cursed lair in Darktide, a difficulty bracket where the players are good enough to have plans, but not good enough to actually execute them. This is the appropriately titled Heresy difficulty, and it is the only place in all of Darktide I have ever seen genuine toxicity. So much like the Poxburster, if you see them, just kinda push them aside and let them stew in their own filth. But what about the updates? Is Darktide still being actively developed? I am happy to say that the answer is yes, albeit about as quickly as the Great Unclean One. There is a semi-exciting patch every quarter, with a really juicy one coming once a year. And as it so happens, one of those dropped recently with a brand new game mode in tow. That update has brought Darktide up to 4 distinct game modes. Linear missions, which are the game's bread and butter, a horde mode with some light roguelite elements, the new expedition mode, which is basically Helldivers 2 at home, and my personal favorite, Havoc. Havoc is most easily described as World of Warcraft's Mythic Plus, a set of progressively harder modifiers that push you to not only master your own class, but also learn how to play as a team, because that is the only way you're going to survive the, insert drumroll, Darktide. It is great stuff and something I would highly recommend you try once you become comfortable with the combat. But besides being a bit slow, which honestly I don't really mind, there is one problem with Darktide's updates. They often feel unfocused. Instead of taking one concept and polishing it until it shines like the Astronomicon, the team prefers to bounce around. The upside is a wider variety of content, like the aforementioned roguelike mode. The downside is that the roguelike mode will probably never reach its true potential since the team has already moved on to the Helldivers 2 expeditions. And while I would love to be proven wrong, chances are those two will get shelved once they inevitably move on to, I don't know, a cooking sim. But don't get me wrong, none of the game modes are bad. They simply can't be when the basic gameplay is this much fun. So just treat the side stuff as an occasional treat rather than something you'll sink hundreds of hours into. But if you do want to zone out and suddenly lose 100 hours, the normal missions are almost infinitely replayable. The AI director in charge of them is an unhinged lunatic who will throw absurd hordes of enemies at you, but never in numbers that make it feel impossible. It is surprisingly fair for someone who is constantly plotting your doom, and honestly, I really respect that. And speaking of plotting your doom, how is the monetization? Does Darktide try to fleece you for all you're worth, or can you have fun with just the base game? On the good side, all the major updates are free, so as a brand new player, you'll instantly have access to a ton of different and genuinely fun content. And for a game that goes on a fairly deep sale, quite often, that is some bolter-sized bang for your buck. The cosmetic store is another story entirely. The skins are expensive and rely heavily on FOMO. So if there is a piece of armor you really like, there is no indication of how long you'll have to wait for it to cycle back. Maybe it'll be a couple of weeks, or maybe it'll be a couple of months. But thankfully, at least all of this is completely optional. As for the 2 new classes, they're around $10 each and offer a pretty good deal in my opinion. The Arbiter is a Judge Dredd cosplayer who can eat an absurd amount of punishment, while the Hive Scum is a drug-addled murder hobo who can practically fly across the battlefield. They are great fun if their playstyle appeals to you, but it's not something you actually need to buy. Which leads directly into the most important question. Would I recommend Darktide? Absolutely. For a game that launched in such a rough state, it is genuinely remarkable how good it is now. Without even a shred of exaggeration, it is one of the best shooty slicey games I have ever played. I know that sounds like cheap praise, but it really is true. So if you're in the mood for screaming about the Emperor while charging at hordes of cultists with a comically oversized relic sword, Darktide is absolutely worth playing. I have already put 1,000 hours into it, and I'll probably add hundreds more before I'm done. And if you're ready to take the plunge, I've got guides covering everything from build tips to gameplay strategy, all linked in the description. Thanks for watching, and bye bye!